something very disconcerting has happened concerning that military air crash. Another one, it would seem. But we'll get into more of those details in our conversation with AVM Air Vice Marshal Adekunle, who is a retired Air Vice Marshal of the Nigerian Air Force. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you have been Chief of Training and Operations in the Nigerian Air Force, so you would understand, exactly what happened here. First of all, when you heard this news, how did it come across to you?
Thank you for that question. I'd like to start by joining my voice to the voices of millions across the land who have commiserated not just with the Nigerian Air Force but with the nation as a whole. I want to pray for the repose of the souls of the departed and comfort for those who are left to mourn them. No one, no father likes to stay alive and see his children dying. Having reason to be Chief of Training and Operations, you pray that the people you left behind that provided good training and everything will live up to do greater things for the Nigerian nation than what you were able to achieve. So, obviously, it was with a touch of sadness that we received the news. But as a professional, you live with the reality that this is one of the sad, unpleasant, but inevitable realities of military aviation.
Well, this is not the only one that has happened since last year, for instance. We might be able to see on the screen as well that the Beechcraft King Air Beef 350I crashed at Bassa Village after reporting engine failure while on a reconnaissance mission to Niger State. That was in February 2021. A month and 10 days after, another aircraft, Alpha Jet aircraft NAV 475 was declared missing while on operation in the Northeast. 2 pilots on board, and a few days after, the Army found the wreckage in Sambisa. May 21, another Beechcraft King Air 350I crashed near Kaduna International Airport with 11 fatalities, including Chief of Army Staff Lieutenant General Ibrahim Atahiru. July, another Alpha Jet aircraft crashed in Zamfara State, and now this one. You have been Chief of Policy and Plans in the Nigerian Air Force before you had to leave. Is there something that you think maybe we missed in the process that is responsible for these litany of air crashes?
When something goes wrong, you are bound to look very far afield and ask yourself, are we doing something wrong? Unfortunately, the reality is that it's not peculiar to us. The United States Congress emplaces a bipartisan congressional investigatory panel about 2-3 years ago, I think 2019, to investigate all the crashes they've had between 2013 and 2018. They found they've had about 186 crashes that claimed about 224 lives, mostly pilots, engineers, technicians, gunners, master aircrew, electronic operators, and what have you, all involved with aircraft operation. In all, they lost about $11.6 billion. If you put that into context, that's about the budget of about 9-10 states in Nigeria. I doubt if how many states in Nigeria budget up to 400 and something billion naira, because $1 billion is about 400 and something billion naira, now even at the official exchange rate. So that tells you that this thing is not peculiar to us. The United States, which is the premier air force on earth, had such a record. Most of the training that we provided for our boys is by all these advanced air forces, as well as local training. But The reality is that for as long as you get involved in intensive learning like we are doing right now, for a very long time, bear in mind, the Nigerian Air Force was not even properly equipped. Again, we have to thank the current government. In the last 6-7 years, the Air Force has acquired about 42 aeroplanes.
Well, AVM, I get the argument of, the fact that it's not peculiar to us. I mean, there is no issue that is peculiar to any nation in the world. But the peculiarity is to ourselves, how we domesticate the issues to ourselves. It is, I mean, you've talked about the value of the equipment and all of that. Perhaps even the value of the training. Even more costly are the value of their lives, which is the question that I'm asking around how, what, maybe there was something you think we may have missed. Whatever lessons the U.S. Congress may have come up with from the investigation should be perhaps some guidance for us in this nation that, look, you guys can afford this. You said it was between 2013 and 2020. These that I have listed out are from 2021 for last year alone. So I'm just wondering if you think there was something we could have done that could have averted these crashes that happened. Yes, there may be human errors, there may be mechanical errors. What are the findings that you think are like a perennial trait in all of the cases?
From a professional perspective, I would only advocate continuous training, continuous education, especially safety-related training. Because you see, if you buy a brand new aeroplane and you park it, it's going to be there, gleaming, shiny paints and everything. But for as long as you operate the way the Air Force operates, high speed, close proximity to each other, and sometimes very close to the ground, you run a risk of something going wrong. As long as you operate aeroplane the way an Air Force is supposed to operate, sometimes in hostile environment or preparing to operate in hostile environment, simulating hostility and what have you, performing high energy maneuvers, aerobatics and things like that, you are bound to have these things happen. But thankfully, the current leadership of the Air Force is safety conscious. The combat chief himself is a trained flight safety officer from one of the most advanced countries on earth. And he has in place a quarterly flight safety program for all the units, all the operational units. In my time, you had about 15-20% of us who are aircrew undergoing flight safety training. Right now, what the Air Force is doing is they want to ensure that as much as possible, all the officers within the main operational bracket, flight lieutenants, squadron leaders, wing commanders, get flight safety training, which means the gospel of playing safe is going to spread to a much wider range of officers than it was in my time. And I think that is commendable.
Well, the question I'm asking, AVM, is around if there is anything you notice to be consistent in the cases. The recent cases around the Boeing air crashes, there was a line that one could say, okay, this is what was happening. It was the automation system or whatever it is that has come out, and everyone, the authorities, specialists such as yourself, will be able to say this is consistent in all of the cases. So that's why I'm asking if there is anything that you think perhaps the investigations may have revealed as being consistent in each of these cases. The safety concerns are understandable, training expertise are understandable, but are you saying each of them is peculiar in its own, nothing ties anyone to the other?
Every aircraft accident is a child of its own, and every child has its peculiarity. I may do something today and get away with it. You may do it tomorrow and you may not get away with it. So, except you sit down and place all the air accident reports side by side, then you cannot come up with a single trace and say, okay, this is the thing, this is the string that is common to all of them, or this is the peculiar factor that strings all of them together. From my experience, you can only preach and advocate that, look, safety consciousness, become like second nature to air crew. That people be deployed on the aeroplanes for which they are most capable and for which they have the best flair. And so many other factors like that. You cannot, on the basis of, say, one accident, conclude that these are the things or this is the thing that an organization is doing wrong. No, it's impossible. You can only do that if you piece together a set of accident reports, and then you say, okay, this was what was noticed in this. And if you think about it, you are talking about an accident involving Beechcraft, Alpha Jets, and then the latest is Mushshak. They are different aeroplanes with very wide range of performance characteristics. In the case of the Boeing, you are talking about all Boeings having MCAS problem, which was traced to the new design, feature that was in place on the Boeing 737, which didn't exist on the 737NG. So it's like comparing a hawk with an eagle. They are two different things. They are two different birds.
For the layman,
yes, sir.
A bird is a bird. Most certainly. Yeah. So if these are all fighter jets, that the Air Force uses, the question anyone is going to be asking is exactly the question I asked.
Yeah, like the Mushshak, for instance, is a trainer aircraft.
Okay.
And the people involved were instructor pilots. For people to be called instructor pilots means they had gone beyond being pilots. They are teachers of pilots. You don't give such an assignment to laymen. You don't give such an assignment to, average guys. Okay. They are usually top of the class guys that become instructor pilots.
Okay. Now, you know that we are dealing with very serious issues in terms of security in the country, and most certainly the security, protection, safety of the personnel that we send on errands to do these jobs, it's very, very important. One of the cases, for instance, talked about a missing aircraft that was found, perhaps shut down, in Sambisa Forest, and definitely something that gives concern. Now, in the light of the new charge, I would say, to security operatives, by the president, what would be your own counsel on taking this on in the light of these quote-unquote vulnerabilities that we have seen? What are the things that you would advise that the Air Force in particular should take particular care to pay attention to in order to avert such things, especially for their own safety and security?
First and foremost, many of these aeroplanes that are involved in direct hostile activities have escape mechanisms on them. But sometimes, if an aircraft gets shot and the missile hits an equipment that inhibits the operation of the ejection system, what can the pilot do? He is stuck with that aeroplane. He's bound to go down with it. So what I would say is this: as much as possible, the Air Force should play safe by deploying its aircraft only when the chances of survivability of the air crew is as close to 100% as possible. But then you can only plan. You can only make the best arrangement. You can only make the best facilities available to your personnel. You cannot plan for your enemies. We are not fighting a conventional war. I think that's one thing people need to bear in mind. We are fighting an unconventional war. We are fighting a war in which you don't even know if the people you are talking to are passing information to your enemies. We are fighting a war in which some people think they are fighting for God. So it is not a cut and dry thing in which you say, once we do this, this will bring it to an end. Flying aeroplanes is a risk-bearing enterprise. We cannot run away from that. For as long as we fly, I hate to admit it, something is bound to go wrong.
Okay. Cardi.
Very much. AVM experts in the field have, raised a concern, saying that, when details of past crashes, the investigations on those past crashes are not made public, then it has a tendency to maybe impact on perhaps accountability, trust. In fact, there's been another statement on the back of this crash from, I think it was from the PDP, raising questions as to why we've had that much in the space of just, in fact, during the duration of this administration. But over the past 1 year, we've had 5. So isn't it also a very important part, especially when Ayo asked that, is there a thread, a common thread or something we can look out for if perhaps we have these investigations made public? Because when the AIB releases, it says it's left to the force to make these details to make them public. So isn't that an important part of this conversation we should also be asking about?
Thank you for that question. First and foremost, it is not every accident report that you can make public. For very obvious reasons, we are talking about military aeroplanes. Even the manufacturers of some of these aeroplanes are in direct competition with each other. So it is not everything about a military accident that you want to make available to in the public space. Not just because of that, even because of your own adversary. Civil accident reports have to be made public because it gives the traveling public a lot of information about what transpired and what is likely to be done to prevent its reoccurrence. In the military setup, everyone that has what we call the need to know will receive this accident investigation report, and it will be disseminated down the line to the lowest group of people that have the need to know.
Network.
Okay, just one quick one, and then we can close. Do you think aircraft personnel are vulnerable?
Aircraft operators are vulnerable because God didn't create us to fly. Take it from that perspective. We were not created to. If God wanted us to fly, we will have wings. But because we were not created to fly, aircraft operators have done so many things to ensure that, yes, we are going to operate in an environment that is unnatural to us. So many things will be done to ensure that the unnaturalness, if I can use that word, of the strange environment we are operating, its impact on our lives will be mitigated as much as possible. But for as long as we fly, my brother, things will happen. We only pray that it does not happen to the extent that it cripples us as a nation or it destroys our fighting potentials.
It's like you just punched a big hole in the law of aerodynamics. But we have to thank you very much, AVM Adekunle. He's a retired Air Vice Marshal of the Nigerian Air Force, former Chief of Training and Operations, Nigerian Air Force, and former Chief of Policy and Plans of the same institution. Thank you so much.